In 1977, former beauty queen Joyce McKinney made headlines when she kidnapped Mormon missionary Kirk Anderson and turned him into her sex slave. As you might imagine, the so-called case of the Manacled Mormon made headlines all over the world. While kidnapping a missionary is certainly one of the crazier things Joyce McKinney ever did, she has made headlines for other behavior. So, today we're going to take a look at the bizarre life of Manacled Mormon mastermind Joyce McKinney. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other infamous crime stories you would like to hear about. Okay, so here's some more on the Manacled Mormon mastermind. A romance between a beauty queen and a Mormon missionary sounds like the plot of a movie, but in reality, it all started in a fairly ordinary way. Joyce McKinney first met Kirk Anderson in the mid-1970s when they were both students at Brigham Young University in Utah. She was studying for her doctorate in drama and had recently converted to the Mormon religion. He was an undergraduate and just 19 years old, while she was 25. They became romantically involved and reportedly had a romantic liaison at least once. McKinney later claimed this encounter led to a pregnancy and a miscarriage. Anderson, who was conflicted about the whole thing, went to his church to express how he violated his religious beliefs about waiting until marriage before having sex. Subsequently, he decided to leave the country and didn't tell McKinney where he was headed. This is where things start getting weirder, because in what most people would agree is a minor violation of privacy, McKinney proceeded to hire a private detective to track Anderson down. When she found out he was in England on his Mormon mission, she followed him there with a friend named Keith May. McKinney confronted Anderson on the steps of a Mormon church. Holding what appeared to be a real gun, she marched him to her car where she and May used chloroform to knock Anderson out. They then drove to a rented countryside home in England. There, she reportedly handcuffed Anderson to a bed with mink-lined handcuffs. Where do you get mink-lined handcuffs? That's the real mystery. McKinney left Anderson tied to the bed for several days. During that period, she had intercourse with him several times, and later she claimed that he agreed to marry her, which she seemed to believe was a decision he made on his own, instead of as a prisoner held at gunpoint. After 3 days, however, Anderson was able to free himself and flee. Mink handcuffs must not be that secure. From there, he went straight to the police. After talking with Anderson, British authorities arrested McKinney for kidnapping him. But in a twist that might seem somewhat shocking to our more modern sensibilities, she did not face harsher charges. In fact, under British law at the time, there was no such thing as a sexual crime charge where the victim was a man. When McKinney was out on bail awaiting her trial, the young woman embraced the British tabloids who, in turn, embraced her right back. There was a worldwide news frenzy, and the media nicknamed her Madam Mayhem. Instead of facing justice for the crime she committed, she actually made a significant amount of money selling her story to the tabloids. She appeared on the covers of the Daily Express and the Daily Mirror at the exact same time, each with similar stories. The Daily Express reportedly paid her £40,000 in cash for her tale, the equivalent of roughly £225,000 or $310,000 in today's amounts. After McKinney spent 3 months in London's Holloway prison, the courts released her on bail due to her declining mental health. Mental health issues, who'd have guessed? Once out of prison, though, her mental health problems apparently cleared up real fast, and she cashed in on as much of the publicity of the investigation as she could. Then she and her accomplice, Keith May, fled England. They landed in Canada, where they used false passports to enter the country before returning to the United States. In a twist that sounds like it comes from a comedy movie, the pair attempted to hide their identities by disguising themselves as nuns. U.S. authorities were not fooled, though, and arrested them for falsifying passports. However, by that point, British authorities had decided not to file extradition charges on McKinney. McKinney told tabloids that her preparation for the kidnapping included reading books on deprogramming people into leaving cults. She believed she could use her body to help de-brainwash Kirk, who she took to calling Cult Kirk. That's certainly a novel approach. McKinney believed the Mormon Church was a cult that had convinced her true love, Anderson, to shirk her and run away to England. However, whether she legitimately believed these things or was merely trying to make her crime seem more sympathetic is anyone's guess. McKinney believed in addition to saving Anderson from a cult, she was fixing what she alleged to be his repressive desires. She told the courts their acts were consensual and claimed he was grinning like a monkey. She went on to explain to the courts how she didn't even derive any pleasure from their encounter, as she was too busy trying to satisfy him. She claimed the bondage was part of a cure she was using to fix his problems. Anderson, for his part, adamantly maintained that everything was non-consensual. Despite the fact that McKinney later denounced the Mormon religion, she was reportedly dedicated to it for a time and had converted while staying with a Mormon family during college. Whether it was her newfound religion or her flair for the theatrical, McKinney reportedly became obsessed with the then-popular Osmond family, which included the famous Donnie and Marie. Before McKinney met Anderson, she even allegedly had a relationship with one of the Osmond brothers, Wayne, whom she wanted to marry. Under the pretense of rescuing Anderson, whom she alleged was her fiancé, McKinney recruited some men to help get Anderson out of the cult. Via a newspaper ad, she hired 2 bodyguards to come with her and Keith May over to England. Those men were Gil Parker, a bodybuilder, and Jackson Shaw, a pilot. When the 4 were at a hotel on the day of the abduction, Parker reportedly saw McKinney and May pull out a gun, chloroform, and microphones and listening devices. Realizing the circumstances were a little different than what they had been led to believe, Parker and Shaw declined to participate and took off. After news of the Manacled Mormon story made headlines, McKinney became an overnight sensation. The press invited her to movie premieres and parties with rock stars such as the Rolling Stones and the Bee Gees. She even claimed to have attended a movie premiere with Joan Collins, where the famous actress was annoyed at all the attention the young instant celebrity received from the media. Prior to her arrests, McKinney participated in beauty pageants. In 1973, she was selected to be Miss Wyoming and competed in the Miss USA pageant. Several tabloids dredged up old newspapers and magazines with ads of McKinney, alleging she worked as a high-class call girl. McKinney, however, disputed this characterization. The former glamour model maintained the photographs were not pornographic and claimed tabloid filmmakers stole nude pictures from her home. Who doesn't have nude glamour shots of themselves at home? You'd think that after getting away with such crimes, McKinney would leave well enough alone. But she didn't. In 1984, Utah police arrested her for stalking Anderson. He reported her sitting in a car outside of his place of employment. In her car, authorities found a notebook full of information about Anderson's day-to-day activities and movements. The trunk of her car contained handcuffs and chains. Reports do not say if those handcuffs were mink. She told police that she just wanted to talk to Anderson and see how he was doing. You know, with handcuffs and chains. Anderson, taken aback, told authorities he thought that chapter was over and he never expected Joyce McKinney to reappear in his life in any shape or form. In 2008, McKinney was in the news once again. This time, it was for dog cloning. Under the name Burnin' McKinney, she reportedly ordered a South Korean laboratory to clone her beloved deceased pit bull, Booger. The purchase cost her $50,000, which was a reduced price because she promised to garner publicity for the cloning lab. Her transaction and involvement aided in starting the world's first ever commercial dog cloning company. In 2011, noted filmmaker Errol Morris made a documentary about the McKinney case. Titled Tabloid, it covered McKinney's instant rise to fame, thanks to the British and American magazines and newspapers who covered the sensational story in vivid detail. 5 years later, McKinney attempted to sue Morris, claiming the filmmaker told her the documentary would clear her name, and instead it painted her as a prostitute and crazy person. The accused offered to settle the case for $65,000, but McKinney refused, claiming they had made millions off of her and she wanted some of those profits. According to Morris, the courts dismissed the suit due to McKinney's history of being overly litigious. In 1978, Daily Mirror journalist and historian Anthony Delano released Joyce McKinney in the Case of the Manacled Mormon, a true crime book documenting McKinney's story. McKinney claimed to be working on her own memoir titled A Very Special Love Story. She even mentioned it in several of the newspapers when the scandal first broke. She later accused the documentary filmmakers of Tabloid of stealing the manuscript. To date, she has not completed the memoir. In July of 2019, Los Angeles police arrested McKinney in connection with a hit-and-run incident that took the life of a 91-year-old Holocaust survivor named Gennady Belatsky. The incident was captured on a surveillance camera, and McKinney, who was by this time homeless and living in her vehicle with 3 dogs, was identified by residents of the neighborhood in which the crime occurred. McKinney faced several charges for her actions, including vehicular manslaughter, and if convicted, she could face up to 11 years in prison. However, in February of 2020, a judge ruled she was not competent to stand trial. So what do you think about the life of Joyce McKinney? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.